I learned the truth on the quietest day of my life, standing beside a casket that held the man I once trusted to grow old with me. Nothing in that room raised its voice, yet everything in me felt unsettled in a way I could not yet explain. My name is Laverne Collins. I am 62 years old, and I have lived most of my life in Birmingham, Alabama, in the same narrow house with the same creaking floors that learned all my secrets before anybody else ever could. That day, even the walls felt like they were listening. I had been a wife for 38 years, and I believed I understood what that meant. I believed love was quiet work, done daily, without applause. I believed loyalty was something that stayed put even when people changed. I believed respect was something you did, not something you demanded. At the funeral, people came in slow waves, dressed in black and gray, speaking in softened voices like the air itself might break if handled too roughly. I stood where I was told to stand, shook the hands I was expected to shake, and accepted words that did not land anywhere inside me. He lay there in stillness, dressed better than I had seen him in years, and I remember thinking, not for the first time, that death has a way of making a man look honest even when his life might have told a more complicated story if anyone had cared to look closely. I met my husband Harold when I was 23 years old, back when the world still felt wide enough to hold every promise I believed in. He was steady in his ways, not loud or showy, and I mistook that quiet for depth I would later spend years trying to understand. We built our life in pieces, not all at once. A small house first, then children, then routines that settled in like furniture you stopped noticing after a while. I took pride in keeping things together, even when I could feel the weight of that responsibility leaning more toward me. Harold had a best friend named Curtis. He was around so often that he stopped feeling like a guest and started feeling like part of the structure of our home. He laughed easier than Harold did, spoke more freely, and noticed things that Harold sometimes let pass without comment. Back then, I thought it was a blessing to have someone like Curtis around, a man who could fill in the quiet spaces, who could sit at the table and make conversation feel less like work. I never questioned why his presence felt necessary. I only accepted that it was. Looking back, I can see now that some arrangements don't announce themselves as unusual when you're living inside them. They settle in gently, without resistance, until one day you realize they'd been shaping your life in ways you never fully examined at the time. There were small things, the kind you notice but do not hold on to long enough to question. Curtis would arrive without calling, stepping into the house like he had a key of his own. Harold never seemed surprised to see him, just nodded as if some understanding had already been settled elsewhere. Sometimes I would find them sitting together in the quiet, not speaking, just sharing space in a way that felt complete without me. I told myself that was what long friendship looked like. Men, I believed, carried their closeness differently, without the need for constant words or explanations. There were evenings when Curtis stayed longer than expected, lingering after dinner while Harold stepped outside or disappeared into another room. I would clear the table alone, hearing the low murmur of voices that stopped whenever I came too close, like a door gently closing without sound. I chose patience because I had been raised to believe that not every question deserved to be asked out loud. Some things, I was taught, reveal themselves in time if you allow them space. So I made space, even when something in me wanted to reach out and disturb the quiet. And over the years, that quiet became its own kind of answer, though I did not yet know how to read it. It sat between us, unnoticed in plain sight, shaping my understanding of what was normal until normal itself became something I could no longer clearly define. The years carried on the way years do, without asking permission. Our children grew into their own lives, leaving behind rooms that held echoes more than presence. Harold and I learned how to move around each other in the quieter house, speaking when needed, resting in silence when words felt unnecessary. Curtis never drifted far. If anything, his presence became more constant as the house emptied. He would stop by in the afternoons, sometimes with no reason at all, sitting in the same chair by the window, like it had been waiting for him longer than I had. There were moments I could not quite place, small pauses that lingered longer than they should have, a look that passed between them when they thought I wasn't watching, a kind of understanding that did not require explanation, as if something had already been said years ago and did not need repeating. I remember once asking Harold, gently, why Curtis came around so often when there was no work to be done and no plans to keep. Harold only shrugged and said, "That's just how it's always been," and I let that answer settle, though it did not rest easily inside me. It is a strange thing how a person can live inside a question without naming it. I went on tending to my home, holding on to the shape of the life I believed I had, even as something beneath it shifted in ways I could feel but had not yet found the courage to face. The day everything shifted did not announce itself. It came like any other, with small tasks and quiet routines. The funeral moved along in its proper order, each person stepping forward, saying what they came to say, then stepping back into their own lives again. I stood there receiving condolences that sounded the same no matter who spoke them, words about strength, about time, about healing. I nodded when expected, held hands when offered, and kept my voice steady in a way I had practiced over a lifetime without realizing it. Curtis waited longer than most before coming to me. I noticed that. He stayed near the back for a while, watching, not speaking, his hands folded in front of him like a man holding something heavier than grief. When he finally stepped forward, the room felt smaller. He took my hand, but not the way others had. His grip lingered, not tight, just present, as if he needed to be certain I would not pull away before he found the words he had come to say. And for the first time that day, I felt something move beneath the surface. He leaned closer, not enough for anyone else to notice, and said quietly, "There's something you need to know." And in that moment, standing beside the man I had buried, I understood that the day was not finished with me yet. I did not answer him right away. I remember that clearly. There are moments when silence feels safer than movement, like stepping carefully on ground you suspect may not hold. Around us, people continued their conversations, unaware that something small but irreversible had just shifted. Curtis released my hand slowly, as if giving me time to refuse what he had not yet said. His eyes stayed on mine, steady in a way I had never seen from him before. It was not urgency I saw there. It was something closer to long-held restraint finally loosening its grip. I told him we should step outside. My voice sounded normal, even to me, and that surprised me more than anything else. We walked past folded chairs and soft murmurs, through a door that felt heavier than it should, into air that did not quite match what I was feeling inside. Outside, the light was too bright for the kind of conversation that was about to happen. Curtis stood beside the car park fence, looking down at his hands before speaking. I waited, not because I was calm, but because I had learned over the years how to endure not knowing. He finally said it. Not everything at once, just enough to change the shape of what I believed. About Harold, about time, about moments I had been in the same house and yet somehow not fully present in the life I thought I understood. And nothing in me responded immediately except a deep, quiet stillness that felt older than grief. Curtis did not tell it like a confession at first. He spoke as though he was placing pieces on a table, careful, measured, afraid that any sudden movement would scatter them. I stood there listening, not interrupting, though I could feel my breathing change in ways I did not control. He spoke about years I thought were ordinary. Evenings when Harold said he was tired but was not at home, trips that never made sense when I asked later, names I had heard once and dismissed. Curtis said my trust had been built on explanations that were never fully complete. I remember asking him, very quietly, why he was telling me this now, at a funeral, when nothing could be changed. His answer came slower than his words. He said he could not carry it anymore, not with Harold gone and no more reason left to protect silence. There was no anger in his voice. That is what unsettled me most. It sounded like someone finally setting down a burden they had held so long it had become part of their posture. I realized then that truth does not always arrive with cruelty. Sometimes it arrives with exhaustion. I did not cry, not then. Something inside me simply shifted its weight, as if a long-held belief had quietly moved out of place. I stood in that unfamiliar stillness, understanding that what Curtis had given me was not new pain, but a different way of seeing everything that came before it. I walked back into the funeral home without saying another word to Curtis. My feet carried me automatically, as if my body still trusted routine even when my mind had begun to separate itself from it. Inside, nothing looked different, yet everything felt altered. People were still there, still speaking softly, still performing the familiar rhythm of farewell. Harold still lay where I had left him, unmoved, unchanged, as if the world outside him had not just cracked open in ways I could not explain to anyone in that room. I stood by the casket longer than I had before. I studied his face in a way I had never done in life, not as a wife now, but as someone trying to reconcile memory with something newly introduced into it. The silence around me felt heavier than grief alone. I thought about all the years I had chosen patience over questions, how many times I had let uncertainty pass because I believed peace was more valuable than disruption. I had called it wisdom, but now I wondered if it had also been avoidance dressed in dignity. Still, I did not break. I learned something in that moment that surprised me. Pain does not always demand reaction. Sometimes it simply demands recognition. And I stood there recognizing that my life had contained truths I had agreed not to see, even when they were standing in plain sight. The day did not end when the funeral ended. It only changed shape. People began to leave in groups, hugging me longer than usual, as if extra time could soften what they assumed I was feeling. I accepted it all without resistance, though none of it reached where I was now living inside myself. When the last few guests remained, I sat alone in a side room, away from the noise of polite departure. My hands rested in my lap, still and unfamiliar to me. Curtis had not followed me back inside. I did not look for him. Something in me needed distance before understanding could begin. I thought about Harold not as a husband anymore, but as a life I had shared without fully seeing. The details of Curtis's words returned slowly, not as a flood, but as fragments, enough to make the past feel rearranged, not erased, just differently arranged than I had once believed. There was no anger rising in me, only a quiet reassessment. I had spent decades building meaning from consistency, from presence, from routine. Now I understood that consistency is not the same as clarity. A person can be near you every day and still remain partially unknown. When I finally stood to leave, I felt neither lighter nor heavier, just aware that something had ended long before that day, and I had only just been given the language to understand its ending. And even that understanding came without noise, only stillness settling where certainty used to live. I did not go home right away. I sat in my car outside the funeral home until the light began to soften, watching people leave in ones and twos, their lives continuing in directions that no longer included me in the same way they had only hours before. When I finally started the engine, my hands felt steady, though I cannot say my thoughts were. There was no clear decision forming inside me, only a quiet understanding that I could no longer return to my life exactly as it had been arranged in my mind. At home, the house felt unchanged, but I did not belong to it in the same way anymore. The room still held my furniture, my photographs, my routines, yet something had shifted in how I moved through them, as if I were now a guest in a place I had once called entirely mine. In the days that followed, I did not seek answers. I did not confront memories or chase explanations. Instead, I paid attention to what remained when certainty was gone. Morning light through the kitchen window, the sound of neighbors living their own ordinary lives, the quiet between thoughts. I understood then that some truths do not arrive to destroy a life, but to reveal where it had already been fragile. Harold was gone, and with him the version of my history that had felt complete. What remained was not revenge, not closure, but a clearer kind of solitude I had never learned to name before. And in that solitude, I stopped asking my past to explain itself. I only asked my present to be honest with me.